Hello, welcome Nicole Schiener to the podcast this time because you've been here before, but we're doing it video style as well. So nice to see your beautiful face.
Oh, it's wonderful to see you too, Julie.
Thank you. Last time we spoke was in November 2020 in the midst, deep into the pandemic. Before we get into how you are, where you are now, do you want to share where you are and just share any and all or whatever feels relevant context to enabling you to be here right now?
Sure, absolutely. And welcome to everyone listening. So I am located on the Haldeman Tract, and that was land promised to the Haudenosaunee peoples of the Six Nations. And that's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutrals peoples. So I feel grateful um, to have such beauty, to be surrounded by such beauty. I'm close to the Grand River, and deeply grateful for the land and water protectors of the past and the Indigenous people who continue to share their wisdom and their advocacy for this earth and all of us here on this earth.
Mm, thank you. As you're sharing the land acknowledgement, of course, Asha Frost comes to mind, a teacher friend of both of ours, and actually the bridge that enabled us to meet. So, of course, she just came into my mind and heart, and also, acknowledging that I'm in Montreal, known as Jojage, and situated. Is that a word? Situated, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word. On unceded Indigenous lands of the Gagné Gahoga Nation. And of course, um, living into what it means to acknowledge, the land, the people who have come before me and enabled me to be here right now with you and to my own ancestors, doing some work into uncovering or just being curious about my own ancestry these days, and so that's been interesting. But I really appreciate speaking to you always because you, to me, are such a light of so many things, of wisdom, of advocacy, of words that really touch me. I feel like you have such a way, and I've shared this with you, of course, many times, because every time, like, I feel like I could be trying to share something, let's say on social media, and I'll be sitting with it, and it just doesn't come together so quickly for me. And then I see you sharing something either we wanted to bring our attention to, or some element of social justice or mental health. And the way that you describe the issue or the matter, or however you want to bring our attention to it, is so beautifully eloquent and precise. And you have just such a gift for writing. And it's like every time I read, I'm like, oh, that was so good, Nicole. Like, how did you just
Aw,
manage to put
thank
that together?
you.
So I feels like it can never be redundant because I feel that every time I read your writing.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's it's funny because I turned to writing partly because I was seeing common themes that kept coming up in the work that I was doing with clients. And I just felt like, I wish more people knew this,
Yeah.
and not all people that were ready or able to access therapy. Or sometimes it was being a voice for the clients in wanting to help educate kind of the general public about things that were assumptions that were causing harm, and what instead helped. And then also for me, it was the way at times with some of these bigger issues that felt like, I don't know, like it would just, no matter how many clients you support, you still see more of whether it's gender-based violence, sexual abuse, or whatever it was. So to be able to find ways to speak up and speak out and be part of something bigger than
Hmm.
myself, was really helpful for me. And then, of course, sharing my own struggles, learning to share vulnerably and honestly about my journey as a mom, because it wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then my journey as a mental health professional who struggled with secondary trauma, who had to recover through burnout, and partly because of the pandemic, partly because of a whole lot of other factors. But I'm always grateful for the opportunity to be able to kind of turn some of those wounds into wisdom, and then to share them with others, and to hear the impact that's having. It's always so touching, so beautiful. So thank you so much.
Yes, it reaches me, that's for sure. And I know many people. Um, I know today we wanted to reference like your recent article or articles talking about relationships and equality in relationships. And I have this book, Fair Play, here that we'll talk about a little bit. A game-changing solution for when you have too much to do, and in parentheses, and more life to live, by Eve Rodsky. I haven't read the whole thing, that's for sure, but I've picked some things out, and I heard her on some podcasts, and I thought how perfect that we had talked about like this, unpaid labor, and how do we talk about the labor, the mental load, the emotional load, and maybe we could talk about that today. And then I caught wind of Eve Rodsky. I forget where I heard about her. I felt like, oh, I think it was through Elaine Friend, who's been on my podcast many times, the HSP consultant and family life therapist. And she kept talking about fair play. And I felt like, how come I never heard about this book? Like, late to the game, but felt very alive in me to read it or to skim through it. And so I just bringing it here. So of course, we're not going to like get into it. It's not like a book review, but I feel like there's some things in there that we can touch on, like that we had spoken about. Before we do that, we spoke in November 2020. I listened to our podcast and it was beautiful to listen to. I'm always amazed for many reasons. One, it's like, oh, I can conduct a conversation and it sounds coherent on one level. And then the other one level, it's like I keep learning every time I re-listen. And I loved what you shared. And, this idea of like mental health is social justice, and all of the insight that you shared around mental health and the pandemic and dealing with moments of crisis or unknown. And so I want to welcome people to that. And I'll link that in the show notes so they can listen to that. But where are you now? Like, you've had some leaps and changes in your career, and your kids are a little bit older now. And that doesn't mean that you're not as busy as before, but maybe busier. So yeah, just, do you want to tell us where you are? And I'm also curious because we haven't really caught up other than me seeing you on social media and, connecting on some DMs and stuff.
Yeah. So I experienced some physical pain, partly from a recurring from an injury, and then part of it was also just not a really good ergonomically correct setup
Okay.
when I went to working from home, which I think is very common. But through that process of doing some of that physical healing, I really connected with the not feeling fully in alignment with working for a general nonprofit agency, and the complexity of the client issues, the amount of trauma cases that I had, and as a highly sensitive person and as a mom, it was just a lot. And so going through that process, I really looked at, what am I most passionate about? What do I see? Who do I see as being most impacted by the pandemic, and where do I feel like I can be most of service? And so that led me to open up a virtual private practice, as well as to offer walking sessions.
Mm.
So as a registered psychotherapist, it's I can only support people in Ontario, but so I primarily focus on supporting women, moms, the sensitive ones, because I definitely can relate to that, the caregivers, the healers, the helpers, the empaths, the teachers. I've supported a lot of teachers in the last while.
I imagine.
But another aspect of the work that I really love, and my own journey with recovering from vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, is how to support other helpers in the within the organization. So I've been really fortunate to work with some of my um, community partners that I had worked when I did my gender-based violence work, and to be able to provide workshops, mental health and wellness and trauma-informed workshops to support their staff in being able to just to create space to talk about the impact of the pandemic, because we were all thrust into doing the work, but
Yeah.
we were also going through, what some would say was a trauma, and, all impacted in various ways in terms of losses, other, other challenges, stressors, what have you. And so I've really enjoyed that aspect of the work as well. And yes, my kids are older, so they don't need me as much. So it's kind of like the business is my new baby kind of
Yeah.
thing. And then to sort of fill that void, because I loved my time when they were little and we would just play, or I would read them stories, what have you. So to honor that as well as community, because that's really important to me. I doing volunteering in a school with little children, helping them with their reading, and that brings me so much joy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wish my kid was in your class or in that class where you could be coming in. Um, so your kids are, I don't know if you want to share their ages, but they're teens, right? Young
Yes. Yeah.
teens,
Yeah. I've got two teens now.
two teens. Congratulations. I'm writing notes. Impact of the pandemic. We could spend a whole hour on that one, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Congratulations on taking that leap. And it sounds like there's some joy in what you're doing and what you've shifted into. Um,
Yeah, it's really interesting because I do not want to burn out again. So
mhm.
I've been really mindful of building really slowly. And that has been great for my health,
Yeah.
and to be there for my children and offset my husband moving into a more demanding role in his job. But it's also very interesting how much we internalize this pressure of, you know, how we should be, what we should be doing, and, how we associate um, certain things with, you know, success or to feel good about. And so I've really had to challenge that, being careful to not compare myself to others, to really like celebrate
Mhm.
this courage, because it does take courage to
Yeah,
be in the space of unknown, right?
of course.
But in that middle space, which I'm very fortunate to know a lot of entrepreneurs who kind of talk about that middle space, that void where you're kind of in between, waiting, not really sure what else is, am I meant to be doing, who else is meant to come into my life, and just that kind of surrender, right?
Mm,
That's not easy, and that's where a lot of our own stuff, even if we've done our own personal work, a lot of that kind of stuff can come up, spending more time by myself. So it's been really interesting because I've seen parallels in some ways to being at home with a little one, right?
mm,
And some of that feeling of isolation, or some of that feeling of questioning, am I doing enough? And so it's been helpful in that sense to be able to kind of remember, because it was so long ago that mine
mhm.
were that little, to support when I'm supporting new moms. And
It's like this work around, which is continuous around identity, right? Like as we
Mhm. Yeah,
shift, as we change, as we grow older, as children, if we're caretaking, grow, are, gaining their independence, we're constantly faced with, right? Like, what now? Who am I?
yeah,
What do I need to
yeah,
be doing? Do I need to be doing something? How am I
yeah,
feeling? And so, yeah, just honoring the courage and that it's taken for you. And do you have any, for those people listening, and this is resonating in on some level, whether it's caretaking, parenting, or as a caretaking an infant, or children in general, or whatever it is, a transition in life, like what has helped you move through this?
Yeah, well, I think like when I think about each time that I've worked to kind of step outside of my comfort zone, especially somebody who has struggled with my own anxiety and has, you know, stayed fairly,
Yes.
in that comfort zone. Risk taking has not been one of my strengths. So reaching out and having support, whether that be through an online community or whether that be through my own therapist, but or coaching, to have those mentors kind of like to help take you to sort of that next level, and also to help with the stuff that comes up, as I said, right? Um, and because our mind can play tricks on us, right? And we can start to get into, a low place, and really sometimes all we need is just to shift our environment, shift our nervous system state,
Mhm.
with getting outside or calling someone. But if we're not aware that our thoughts can be deeply influenced by the state that we're in, we can start to believe those thoughts to be true, and then go even further down kind of the
Yeah.
rabbit hole, right? So the other thing that I find really helpful is reflective writing. I have
Mhm.
journals upon journals upon journals.
Oh yeah.
And so sometimes it's getting it out and then
Hmm.
being able to relate with that compassion, and to see that, oh, this is a younger part of me, or,
Hmm.
oh, this is actually, this is happening for me because this is something that I need to reclaim, or that I need to heal, or that I need to let go of, which has very much been what my conscious parenting journey has been about. So
Hmm.
um, it's something that I often encourage clients, if we can sit with these experiences, whether it's with our children or partners at work or wherever we find ourselves, creative endeavors,
Hmm.
um, and relate with that curiosity and that compassion to say, okay, why is this coming up for me? And how can I sort of give to those younger parts of myself what I needed but didn't get at the time? Or um, how can I, sort of write the next chapter of my story in terms of what I know to be true now versus what society has told me?
Hmm.
And it's ongoing, right? It
Yeah.
never ends.
Of course, a lot of disruption, a lot of self-compassion, a
Yeah.
lot of curiosity, a lot of looking for the opportunities. It sounds like, how you're describing it. Obviously, I could relate to the process that you're sharing in terms of just knowing that these are the places you can go to, and when it is that you need the support to go to those places, outside of yourself. Because we can't
Right.
do it alone, right? I
Mm,
mean, I know I can't. I could speak for myself, though I often feel like I can. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I was thinking as you were talking, earlier you said you don't want to burn out again. And so you're proceeding with mindfulness and consciousness around how to work. And um, also, I know that because I've been reflecting, not, who is not always reflecting on their social media use, but um, I'm curious for you how that has related to like your taking care of you. How are you taking care of your social media um,
mm,
participation these days? And do you have
yeah.
like a philosophy around that right now?
I think it varies, but the May before I opened my private practice, so I opened it in the September, and the May I took the month off of social media and really was intentional about being present. And I think that that was really important and necessary to kind of shut out all the outside noise,
Yeah.
and to just kind of come back sort of to my roots and sort of how my whole journey of healing started. And that was with a very basic mindfulness practice, and that was with um, slowing down and really soaking up the beauty of nature. um, And then noticing kind of, I don't have the, I don't know if I would say it's the energy or the
Mm-hmm.
inclination. It just doesn't always feel in alignment to be doing what the algorithm says we should do. So,
Yeah.
sort of again, that whole idea of seeing some people that, are pumping out a lot of content every single day. And I kind of oscillate between, oh, I have something I think that's valuable to say, and I'll, have someone like yourself that will share to me, oh, that was beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that. And then other times I'm like, oh, I don't want to contribute to the information overload, right? And
Yeah.
what I really want is for people to trust in their own inner wisdom, in their own their own path, right? And so one of the things I do try to do is when I write my blog, which I also record an audio version, is I try to make like it not too long, and half of it is really an opportunity to kind of do a mindfulness and a self-reflective process. So I try to ask questions that
Mm.
get you to connect to, what's your truth? What are you needing? Or what is this reminding you of? And I try to be really mindful about coming from it from sort of a trauma informed place, in the sense that inviting people to close their eyes and to tune inward can be triggering.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So there's so much out there, guiding and directing us to do that, but not necessarily with the awareness of what impact that could have for people. So I really want people to know that you need to do what feels comfortable for you. And if that is to leave your eyes open, if that is to, get up and walk around, if that is to take a break, if that is to not do it at all, if that is, like it's that piece is really important. And I worry sometimes with social media therapy, even though, everyone says when they put the content out there, this is not therapy.
Mm-hmm.
um, the thing is, people are using it almost as a replacement for therapy. And the problem with that is that um, it doesn't hold their unique context,
Mm-hmm.
right? So just because
Mm.
it's worked for one person doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for them. And also, too, it depends on what nervous system state that we come into when we're consuming that content, as to how much we're going to get out of it. And, are we going to be able to actually apply what we're learning? Because there's a difference between, being inspired and then actually taking the action and being able to move through without getting stuck back into, those old patterns, right? And I think nowadays there's so much loneliness that people are feeling, and disconnection, that having someone that actually gives you that undivided attention, that gift of real presence and listening. Like I remember you were sharing with that interview that you did, with the man around leadership and present, right? Like that is such a gift that I think
Mm-hmm.
so many people are craving, especially moms that and caregivers that are doing everything for everyone else, right? It's like, what about me? Like they can almost start to feel invisible, and their needs don't matter, they don't matter, right? And we see that with the rise in mental health struggles and burnout for women, not just new moms, but moms of middle school children as well.
I'm just here, like, say more. I'm listening. Just press play, and I don't have to say anything. Um, yeah, there's so many places I wanted to just like double click on. I hear people saying, "Let's double click on that." I'm like, "Oh my God, what's going on with our languaging?" Like it does make sense. Like double click. I know what you're talking about, but I feel like I'm riding the wave of like, I don't know, entering this AI universe, even though double clicking is not AI, but do you know what I mean? How do we come
Yes.
back to nature? I'm not going to double click on that. I'm just going to pause and like inquire onto what you just said. But double click just, is a quick way of Do you ever use that term, double click? I'm going to double click on something.
I don't, but I mean, I'll have clients that when they're talking about conversations they've had with somebody, they start doing this as they're talking, right? Because it's like that's how so much of our communication is happening nowadays.
Like this meaning I'm double clicking?
Like texting.
Oh, texting. Okay.
Yeah. So of course we know the problem with texting is that you miss all the body language, right? You miss the facial expression, you miss the tone of voice, you miss all like what is it, 80% is nonverbal, right?
Yeah.
So we miss that. And our children are growing up
Yeah. I mean,
not knowing, if we are not actively coaching them, they're missing out on vital communication skills.
um, yeah, I feel like, um, well, on like a more, superficial level, like I've been spending more time, well, not necessarily, but I'm on LinkedIn and having you there, it feels like, oh, I just gained such an important friend and fellow journey woman on this path, and it just feels like it's so nice to have you there. And I feel like your presence on Instagram was very prominent for me. And I know that you have taken a back seat from there. And I don't know why I'm centering social media, but think that's just the way that I relate with you and to you. And so when I
Right.
see you on LinkedIn, I feel like there's a different, not posture, but there's something that feels different about your presence there. It's like, I'm here, this is what I'm offering, and I'm here to help, and this is how I can support. And it's just nice to see.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have to really, I think it's really important that we pay attention to how we're feeling on different platforms, and give ourselves permission, even if we are running a business, give
Hmm.
ourselves permission to take those breaks, as a mutual friend, a business coach, Celeste Frenette, right? When you listen to your soul, that sometimes means she'll take months off of social media, but then when she comes back with this renewed sense of energy,
Mm.
right? And people feel it, and she doesn't lose anybody out of it. So I think sometimes there's that fear that if I'm not on all the time, I'm going to lose followers or whatever it is, right? And one of the things that, especially if we are running a business, is like, well, what is that return of investment of our time, right?
Hmm.
What is the impact? Because the way the algorithms are set up is that it can be very disheartening, right? And that's part of why I pulled back from Instagram, was that I part of me was like, okay, I know what I have to say is important and valuable, but people aren't seeing it.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to resent just putting the time and the energy and the effort into putting that out there. And I know they say, well, one person,
Yeah.
makes, and yes, agreed.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think, like, it's funny because you were saying, in the book, one of the things that Eve talks about is this sort of misconception that women have an infinite amount of time, right? And so,
And men have a finite amount of time.
yes. And so because we've kind of been socialized to be these multitaskers, to, be constantly thinking about 1,000 different things while we're, doing various things, that it's kind of like just this expectation. Well, this is just one more thing that I have to keep doing and keep doing, keep doing. And I do definitely feel better when I am off of social
Yeah.
media,
Same.
because I think part of it is being, as a sensitive person, as
Hmm.
I prefer, I love my virtual clients because I can reach people outside of my region, and there's a connection there that's different from social media.
Hmm.
Um, I've had, like with yourself and other people, I've had really deep and meaningful conversations through DMs, right? But this sharing, um, putting content out there, I don't know, it doesn't align for me as much. So I'm grateful to platforms like the Gottman Institute, where I can share and know that it's reaching, a much wider audience, right? That
Yeah.
that is really wonderful, because then I can focus on what I enjoy doing and what I'm
Right.
good at, which is the writing part, and then they do the marketing part, right? Which is
That's great.
not what I'm good at.
Or also like you need, that's another hat to wear, right?
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
Um, okay, I want to get to the Gottman article that I love that you wrote. I mean, you've written a few, and I'm just going to reference one, but you can pull in any you want that you want, obviously. Before we get to that, and even though like our time is like, oh my God, I haven't even looked at my notes. What about you? What's wrong with my voice? Um, Walking while offering psychotherapy. I don't know if you want to speak to that for a minute, but I'm very curious about that. And also the impact of the pandemic. I don't know if you want to just say a little bit about that. I know I see it in myself, I see it in my children, I see it in my clients. I feel like, you know, I usually say like we're recovering from the pandemic. Like let's say my husband and I and our family, or I'll speak for us or me. But I'm just curious, what you're feeling. And to that point also, and to the point of social media, I could just speak from my own experience that I often feel very porous, particularly these days, a little more, which is already like off the charts. And so I do enjoy social media. I do enjoy the benefits, but there's also the cons. And I do feel like I'm really needing to be more disciplined about the scrolling and about what I'm taking in and who I'm taking in and why I'm taking it in. And so, of course, it's a continuous process, but I'm trying to be a little more diligent about that, because I'm just noticing the deleterious effects. So, having said that, yes, like impacts of the pandemic, walking through psychotherapy, and I'm just going to keep stacking those questions, which is something you shouldn't do as a coach, but I'm not coaching right now. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think one of the most important things to remember when it comes to the pandemic is that we're still in it, right? Like people are still getting sick.
Right.
Organizations that are, working with a higher risk population are still experiencing outbreaks. So even though like the symptom severity may, be a lot lessened, there's still potential threat and danger out there, right? So that's in our nervous system. And
Is it,
then
do you
there's
know if it's,
also,
sorry to interrupt, but like, are we still at the pandemic state? Like, is it not endemic? Do you know? Like, it is
yeah,
still declared pandemic or?
yes, that I don't know exactly. I
Okay.
do know that restrictions are coming down, but from a perspective of like the virus itself, right? It hasn't gone away,
No,
right?
I don't,
So, I mean,
yeah,
our family just got it in February, and I know a lot of people, more recently. So, even though it was 3 years ago that this started,
I know. It's
which
still
seems,
here.
yeah,
People have long COVID.
still,
People, of course, the losses
yeah,
are,
right. And then, of course, there's not just the impact of the physical, but there's, our society, right?
yeah.
The huge inflation rates and food and housing insecurity and increase of mental health and addiction, hate crimes, all these things that were heightened, gender-based violence. We know these things were heightened uh, during that. And it's, I think we want to get back to quote unquote normal as much as possible. We want to do that for our children and what have you. But I hope that we can also be looking at, you know, well, what can we be doing differently
Hmm.
as a society, right? And let's start individually, let's start as a family. What can we be doing differently so that, we didn't just go through all of this to just go right back to where we were, right?
Hmm.
Um, and the other piece is because there's still that potential threat there, some people haven't even begun to process, right, what's happened, right? We have to be feeling safe in order to do that processing work. So if we're not feeling safe, sometimes like with a lot of parents, focus was on the children and making sure that the children are okay. So they're starting to notice that they're more tired or that they're more irritable or that they're just feeling kind of just going through the motions, right? And that might be an indication that, you did an awesome job. You're there for your kids or your partner, your clients, what have you. But what about you, right? Have you had an opportunity to grieve, to be angry, to have to try to make sense of what this all means, and again, what is the potential invitation or opportunity within this crisis, right?
Mm.
I think that piece, is really important. And then also what keeping an eye on our children and our youth, even if they seem okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like continuing to just check in and see how you're doing, right? Especially with young people that, tend to be more pleasers, tend to, um, be more kind of amicable or agreeable, right? We don't want them to be carrying that alone by themselves, right? For fear that they're burdening us,
Mm.
right? We're seeing how stressed we've been and don't want to put that on us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we want to keep, giving them those opportunities to have healthy ways to move through those emotions and to see if there is a need, for more specific support because their mental health is really suffered. So I don't think it's an either or in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, we shouldn't say kids are resilient and therefore, um, be in this state of heightened anxiety about children and their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do believe children are resilient. We can foster that resilience in them, and we need to be mindful and be checking in with them, and um, not that we need to spend every waking moment with them, but to have those quality connections where they do feel safe to share um, about their inner world, right, and what they're needing.
I wanted to double click on so many things. Um, for people listening that are feeling like, oh, I'm noticing something in my child, or, something in me that I'm tired, or whatever you spoke to, they're resonating with. Do you have, like, is it go reach out to a therapist? Is it like, what is it that you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I did an interview actually with my sister a while back, and I talked about some really specific kind of symptoms or warning signs to look out for in your young people. So maybe we can link
Yeah,
that
I would
one,
love
and
to
then
do
she
that.
also has some suggestions with regards to. She's a nutritionist, so
Okay,
from that
nice.
perspective as well.
Yeah.
Um, I also have some free resources on my website that
Okay, good.
are geared towards supporting nervous system health and then also connecting to your sort of inner wisdom, right, to see like, am i honoring what I need,
Yeah.
right? So those things, and then links to different articles that I've written. But I think the thing with therapy, sometimes people think they need a diagnosis or they need a doctor referral or they need to wait till things get really bad, and I always try to, let people know that there's no prerequisite for it. Like, you don't have to meet certain criteria in order to,
Mm.
access that support. And sometimes it's wonderful to have those rich friendships where you can be vulnerable, and you can share openly with your friends. But sometimes there's things that have happened to us, or there's experiences from our attachment that make it hard for us, to be vulnerable in that way, or to trust that, the people are going to be there for us. And so we hold back, or we feel like we have
Mm-hmm.
to put on a facade. And so sometimes therapy can be really helpful in order to strengthen your relationships and your trust in other people, because
Mm-hmm.
what I always say is it's a temporary relationship. Part of what we're doing is helping you to have a better relationship with yourself, because you're with yourself for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of your life, right? And then also helping you to get more of what you need from the people currently in your life, or to identify better what you need so you can attract more people that can give you what you need if the people currently in your life are not healthy
Hmm.
or unable to support you in that way.
And sometimes it's like, I don't know what I'm feeling or why. I just know that I'm not feeling good. And so maybe somebody can help me identify and work on that and feel safe in my body. Like if anything, for me, the pandemic just highlighted that very familiar feeling unsafe, that is in my bones, and just manifests in different ways or shows up with certain, tendencies to anxiety or whatnot. And I couldn't highlight more the importance of having a therapist. Having access to it often is an issue for people. So, it's just something for me that has facilitated greater mental health, So thank you for your work. And I'm sure people listening are like, how can I speak to Nicole? She would be perfect. Um, one more thing. Okay, so there's the walking psychotherapy. We haven't even gotten to the division of labor or and also your recent certification, I believe it is, as a compassionate care professional. No, what it
Com-
tell-
Compassion fatigue.
compassion fatigue
Yeah.
for
Hmm.
caregivers, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So walking for me,
Yeah, walking. You're like, Julie,
I
stay on track, Julie. Yeah.
I need movement like you.
Yes.
I need movement to be at my best. And so after having some physical injuries, really realizing how important that was. And also, when we are um, feeling unsafe or in heightened stress or threats, whether that's physical or emotional, many of us can go into that sort of freeze mode where everything, is like stiff and tight and shut down. So movement is really good for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also, there's also tons of benefits, in the research about being outside, being in nature, for us, not just the physical health benefits, but also the emotional and the mental health benefits, right? And so it's almost like nature acts as another co-regulator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, it's interesting to it sort of feels like I have an extra partner um
Nice.
in the work that I'm doing. And I've had some clients that were very disconnected from their bodies, had been more of that in that freeze mode, or were feeling really agitated. And the walking, as we talked, just helped with so much of that, grounding, and that finding safe ways to come back into the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the other side of that is that we disconnect, we numb, we shut ourselves off, we find ways to avoid or escape, and then we miss all that vital information
Mm-hmm.
that our body has to offer us, right? That our emotions have to offer us. And so just as a segue to the division of labor piece, right? Like women's anger is giving us such vital information when things aren't fair, right? When things aren't being divided equally, when we're doing too much, right? When we're not having any time to take care of ourselves or meet our own needs, right? The problem is if we're disconnected, if we're stuffing, if we're numbing, because of various reasons, right? So it's not our fault, but there's lots of different reasons why we do this as women.
Mm-hmm.
Then either we sort of suffer in silence and that resentment builds up and there's disconnection from our partners. We're not able to be as present with our children because we're agitated or annoyed with them. We're more at risk for burnout, right? We're more at risk for our relationships breaking down. Right. And I'm thinking, I don't know if you saw, I didn't actually see the whole clip, but the recent TikTok video of the mom, it went viral, and she was talking about how she was so busy packing for everybody else for vacation, she forgot to pack for herself. So she had
Literally.
no clothes for her trip. Yes. And, just this anger, this rage about moms being last. And so my mission is
Yeah.
to help liberate moms, women from perfectionism and the pressure to do it all, because I feel like those are the two sort of big ways that women are socialized, and we internalize in this patriarchal culture that it's our responsibility to take care of everybody else, and we are expected to live up to these impossible expectations. And so how we free ourselves and ultimately our families, because patriarchy doesn't just hurt us, it hurts our partners, our male partners. It hurts our children, right? I keep thinking, I have a son and I'm like, he's gonna have a partner one day, and I want her or him to like me. I want them, I think about that,
No
right?
pressure.
Or
Yeah.
he's gonna have a roommate one day, or he's gonna have he's gonna have coworkers one day, right? And so what we model and what I invite him, the responsibility I invite him to take on is, there's a ripple effect of that, right? So um, when I think about compassion fatigue, which is slightly different from burnout in the sense that it's more people who are in helping professions. So there's similar elements to burnout, but then there's also that often that secondary trauma because of what we're being exposed to, what we're
Mm-hmm.
hearing, what we're seeing. So frontline workers, healthcare workers, therapists, social workers, people that are exposed to the trauma, working with high risk populations, right? Teachers. Whereas you can work for a corporation and you can experience burnout,
Mm-hmm.
um, and have that depletion and lose that interest kind of in what you're doing, or feel like you're making a difference, but you don't also have essentially the trauma symptoms that kind of go along with that, right? And you don't have your worldview distorted. So because of the work that I've done, I have experienced both the secondary trauma and the burnout. So having that compassion fatigue. So when I saw that opportunity to really specialize in that really spoke to me. And what I loved about the program that I took was that she was actually a meditation teacher and was very much sharing things that I had essentially already learned, but she was sharing the research behind it to say that, yes, we know that this is effective in helping to increase resilience and to be able to buffer against, the impacts of doing this work. So it just really affirmed what I was already doing and
Mm-hmm.
then added to the toolbox.
That's
Right?
amazing. I don't know if it was Christine Carter or Kelly McGonigal. Does it happen to
Mm-hmm.
be with her, the program?
No, it was through Pessy, and I think her name is, don't quote me. I think it's Deborah Alvarez, but
Okay. What's
I could be
Pessy?
wrong.
I don't know what that is.
So they're connected to the Psychotherapy Networker. They
Okay.
provide a lot of training
Okay.
for mental health professionals. Yeah,
Okay.
at a
I,
reasonable rate, and it's self-directed,
okay.
so it works
Nice.
well for yeah.
I find the research, I mean, though I've just skimmed the surface around compassion fatigue and, the and how that shows up, physiologically in the body is so fascinating. And I love hearing you talk about it. I'm also looking at the time and I'm thinking, like, do we do a part two? I'm just throwing this out here. Like, I know time is so precious, and just to get us to do here was like months, right? To arrive.
Right.
I've done a poor job at like fulfilling our mission of or so I thought it was the mission of, like, let's talk about this book, let's talk about your Gottman article and unpack it. I think you touched on it, but how do you feel about coming back for like 30 minutes? Is that even possible? 45 minutes, and we can talk about like compassion fatigue and also relate it to, I mean, I'm curious about that, like as a practitioner myself, but also in terms of people I know who are caregivers, family members, and friends, and also the division of labor component. Imagine if you said no, like I
I'm
just
hearing a
like,
series here,
I know
Julia.
exactly. And at the same time, I'm like, in terms of like having compassion for myself, I'm trying to just flow with the podcast. And I haven't been booking any guests for the most part because it's just something else. It just adds another layer of like production and
Yeah.
preparation. And so when I show up, I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to show up and do me. But as I was preparing to meet you, I also feel excitement because I love what you bring and who you are. And it's like, yeah, I want to share it and I want to do it. So it's like walking that fine line. So, but I am intentionally and consciously inviting you back soon so that we can continue and so I don't let the listeners down. But I also want to respect your time. So,
I know I would love to. I mean, I've
okay.
always had a dream of having my own podcast, and what always holds me back is tech. I get very overwhelmed. I try to figure out all the different, the different things involved. So one of the things actually that um I try to think about is like, how can I simplify,
Yeah.
right? And I was actually listening to Caitlin Curtis's beautiful new book, Living Resistance.
Mm-hmm. I
And
haven't read it.
one of the things that she was talking about was an Instagram series that she did during the pandemic. And I thought, I've done interviews on Instagram before, and maybe that's how I use it, like as a conversational piece, right? And as a way of not overcomplicating things, and also not doing it at all
Right.
because, of, because I think that's a big thing too for when, as highly sensitive people, we can sometimes overthink things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But worry so much about how everything is going to work out, how it's going to affect everybody. I think as moms and caregivers, when you're already feeling stretched so thin, sometimes we can talk ourselves out of doing something for ourselves or something that we feel a pull towards because um, it can feel like it's too hard or it's too much, And I used to always say, when my kids were younger, I felt like I had one foot on the gas and one foot on the brakes.
Mm.
Like I knew that there was other things that I wanted to do. There was other ways I wanted to express myself besides the work that I was doing for the agency at the time. But I couldn't see how I could fit it in
Mm-hmm.
because I was living that lie of, I have to put everyone else first. I have to do everything for everyone else. My needs are at the bottom of the priority list. And when I started to make that shift in terms of carving out some time for myself in the morning and carving out a little bit of time, and that's what it was. It was little pockets
Mm-hmm.
here
Mm-hmm.
and there so that it felt manageable, it felt doable. Um, that's what led to me developing this desire to write and to reach more people. And um, I mean, I can't count now how many articles I've written between the agency blog and, my own and various things and what have you. And sometimes I'm surprised, that it's like, oh, I still have all these ideas, right? Because sometimes we worry we're going to run out of ideas, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but
You
anyways,
just like you titled probably like 15 articles in this conversation. Like could talk about this, could talk about that, like, all the double clicking.
right,
It's like I want to
right,
read
to
about
go back.
that.
And that's the thing. Like, I think because I am a therapist, I am more of a conversationalist. So I do like to write, but writing sometimes is a very tedious, time consuming process because it's like trying to
Yeah.
get it just right and probably editing it a little too much, a little bit of my perfectionism coming in there. So yes. So
What about
long story short, love having conversations, love if in any way what we're sharing resonates with other people, and that has a ripple for them and for the people that they love and care about, then it's absolutely worth my time for sure.
Okay, well, I'm thinking of some ideas for your podcast. Like you could call it Double Click on This. And like what if you had a prompt? Not saying you need my ideas or anything, but like podcasts don't have to be long, right? They could be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You use the word
Mhm.
simplify. Like
Yeah.
if you had a prompt from like a client or somebody out there, in the universe of social media asking you a question and then you respond like dear Nicole, kind of thing, or just something, because I feel like you're so like I just sprinkle in one word and then you're off, um so you're off to something magical. Anyways, just some thoughts so that you can get your podcast out there if that's what you want to do. Anyways, you have to go. I have to go. It's 7 minutes past the hour. I've
Oh,
gone over, and I
wow.
want to thank you. So we'll do a part two. We'll fit it into
Sounds
our
good.
schedule
Yeah.
soon. Yeah. Okay. I'll send you some times. But for those listening to this part one, where can they find you?
So at Peace and Possibility, that is sort of the handle that I have for Facebook and Instagram. And then peaceandpossibility.ca is my website, and LinkedIn I'm just in under my name, but you can also find the link to that on my website. That's probably easiest. I have the link to my Gottman Blog article, so I have an author page there, and then you can read any of those. I also have under the free resources on my website, I have different guides, as well as articles that I've written or podcast interviews that I've done. So yeah, lots of ways to
Lots of
find
resources.
to
And if
find
people
me.
are not
Yeah.
in the province of Ontario, Canada,
hmm
can they still work with you on in some way?
So I cannot provide the therapy component,
Okay.
but if I have, uh, like I did in the past, a virtual um, kind of coaching program around perfectionism. So if I'm doing something like that,
Okay.
then yeah, that can be opened up. And I am going to be doing something in collaboration with the Gottman Institute, actually around mindfulness.
Okay.
So that's coming up in early May.
Great.
So I don't know if there'll be more of those,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's different ways that way. And then for people that aren't in Ontario, um, there's Psychology Today. There's the colleges, so the social work college, the psychotherapy college in your area. Those are good ways. And then, or you can check to see what your employer might have as far as employee assistance program, where they might be linked to a specific provider.
Right. Good point. Well, thank you for sharing all those
Yeah,
resources. Thank you for your time. Thank you
no
for showing up
problem.
here in person. You're not here, but you're there, and we're both looking at each other, which is nice. So I will be in touch. I'm going to send you an email today with what might be possible for a part two. Thank you for your
Sounds good.
willingness.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, and thank you to everyone. I hope where you are, the sun is shining. The sun is finally shining where I am, and that is such a treat. So even just getting out and standing in the sunshine for a minute is so good. And
Mm,
we can start with those small things to start caring for ourselves and move us a little bit higher on that priority list. And that will help with the recovery.
hmm
Yeah.
It's a balm for my soul to hear you. So thank you, Nicole.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Bye, everyone.
Bye.